Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Allison Brinkhorst. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm one of the organizers of the PDX Housing Solidarity Project. We'll share a bit more about what we do in a moment, but first I want to start with a few logistics. One, closed captioning should be enabled for anyone who would like to turn on that feature. Feel free to send us a note in the chat if you're having any tech issues. Second, we ask that everyone stay muted. We are up to 37 people on this call. Thank you all for being here. And third, we will be recording tonight's event. If you don't want to be recorded, you can leave your video off. Welcome again to our Q&A event tonight, where we will be hearing from panelists who have creatively redistributed housing-related wealth and privilege to Black and Native first-time homebuyers in Portland. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to those of you who shared in the chat a bit about what home means to you. I'm appreciating your answers. Again, my name is Allison Brinkhorst, and I'd like to start us off tonight with a land acknowledgement. And I want to double check that you all are seeing my screen and that we are recording. Is someone able to confirm that we are recording? I think I see it. Thanks, co-organizers. All right. Here we are. For those of us in Portland, at least, the Portland metro area rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of the Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River, creating communities and summer encampments to harvest and use the plentiful natural resources of the area. That land acknowledgement comes from the Portland Indian Leaders Roundtable. We recognize that a statement like this can feel empty without action, and learning about opportunities for action is why we're here tonight. To kick us off, I'd like to pass the mic to my co-organizer, Love Johnson, to share a bit about what PDX Housing Solidarity Project is and the historical context of our work.
Great, thanks so much, Allison. Hi, everyone. My name is Love. I use she, her pronouns. First, just want to start off, who are we? The PDX Housing Solidarity Project is a collective of Portland-based activists organizing people to redistribute wealth in support of homeownership for our Black and Native neighbors. And we do that through political education about the racialized disparities in homeownership and what to do about it. We do community building to practice housing-related wealth redistribution, and we connect people with wealth to redistribution opportunities. And we work in strong partnership with Taking Ownership PDX, as well as Resource Generation and a couple of other groups in our community. All right, so I'm going to give a brief recap of some of the history we learned in our webinar last year that has led us to the racialized disparities in homeownership that we see today. So some of you may have seen this last time, and some of you maybe have not, but this is really quick and not at all comprehensive, so consider it more of sort of a sampling of history. But again, even with that, it's kind of a lot to take in. Okay, so we know we're sitting on stolen land and that what we now call Oregon is home to thousands of Native people from more than 60 tribes that have survived through physical and legal violence over time. Relating to land, the Donation Land Claim Act in 1850 determined who got land, and it gave white male settlers 320 acres of stolen indigenous land for free, or they got 640 acres if they were married. And just for reference, one Portland city block is about 1 acre, so it's a lot of land. So things like this in the Homestead Act really formed the land ownership patterns that we see today. And then in 1857, Oregon became a state, and our Constitution banned Black people from coming to the state, residing in the state, or holding property in the state. And some scholars have called this provision of the Constitution an attempt to make Oregon a white utopia. So zooming to the present day, this is a map of our city's zoning. And zoning sounds really boring, but it's actually really important because it's the law that determines what types of buildings you're allowed to build, how big they can be, and where. And so as we'll see, it's also determined who can own and live in those buildings. So when cities across the country first got started with zoning, they would literally write into the zoning code what races of people could live in what part of town. And eventually the Supreme Court did strike this down. So after that happened, white people had to find other ways to keep people of color out. And so they did this through single family zoning, which basically requires people to have enough money to buy a whole plot of land and a whole house instead of just one unit in an apartment building, for example. So it turns out this was a pretty effective proxy to keep people of color out of neighborhoods since wealth has been so racialized in this country. And this here is Portland's first zoning map. You can see the first single family neighborhoods are some of our wealthiest neighborhoods today, like Eastmoreland, Laurelhurst, and the area around the Alameda Ridge in yellow. And then another way people stuck to the intentions of racist zoning was through racial covenants. And so these were lines in the deed that you get when you buy a house that explicitly prohibited people of various races from buying a house, owning a house, or living in the house unless they were servants. And these deeds were often on individual houses, but in some cases, like in Laurelhurst shown here, entire neighborhoods organized themselves to put racial covenants over the whole neighborhood. So now I want to focus on Portland's Black communities that have been centered in North and Northeast Portland. The photos here are from the Vanport flood in 1948, which basically took out an entire neighborhood where many Black people and Indigenous people who had left reservations moved to so that they could work in the shipyards during World War II. And when this flood happened, over 6,000 Black people and 10,000 other people were displaced from Vanport. And after the flood, the realtors started in on a practice called racial steering, where they would only sell homes to Black people within the Albina neighborhood. And this piece of their code of ethics here says that they wouldn't sell houses or give loans to Black or Asian people in white neighborhoods. So now let's talk about redlining. Maybe you've seen these maps before. In the 1930s and 40s, government agencies rated different areas to assess whether they should offer loans or loan insurance. And these ratings corresponded heavily with race. And so this meant that people living in the redlined areas did not have access to the capital they needed to buy and maintain their homes. And so Albina was redlined, so people couldn't get loans for home repairs. So their homes often deteriorated and sometimes even more quickly than usual because families were often overcrowded into the small number of homes that they were allowed to live in the city. And then this paved the way for urban renewal. And so in Portland and across the country, federal and local governments deemed certain areas to be blighted so that they could locate big infrastructure projects there. So in Portland, this took the form of the Memorial Coliseum, the construction of I-5, and an expansion of Emmanuel Hospital. And so these projects and other ones destroyed homes, destroyed thriving businesses and hundreds of acres of land. People are only given a small amount of money in exchange for these assets. And so they've really been deprived of many millions of dollars in value over time. So the public sector is responsible for a lot of this action, but not all of it. This kind of brings us to the risky lending and the Dominion Capital scam in Albina in the 90s. The banks essentially colluded and refused to offer traditional mortgages to people in Albina. So instead they could take advantage of people through riskier loan products and other predatory practices. And this really ended up displacing a lot of people from the homes that they thought they'd purchased. So Dominion Capital alone did this with 350 homes in Albina, not to mention the other lenders. And the state was aware of these violations, but did nothing to stop them. So by the 2000s, a lot of Black people in North and Northeast Portland had been essentially divested of their properties and either became renters or had to move elsewhere. And kind of around the same time, more white folks started moving in, fixing up homes they bought for cheap, and public investment flooded back into the area too. And so some of this public investment increased the property values in the area, which further displaced people who couldn't afford to stay. And then one example of this in 2000 is when the city started building the Max Yellow Line. But essentially a city and the federal government didn't keep up its promise of building 3,000 units of housing, including affordable housing in the area, because the funding for the housing fell through. So the results we see today are that as housing gets more and more expensive, people of color are continuing to lose out. These maps from the Portland Housing Bureau show that the average Black household and the average Native household can't afford to buy a home in any single neighborhood in Portland. And this is true for many other communities of color in many neighborhoods as well. And then on the other hand, some neighborhoods have become or have remained concentrations of mostly white, wealthier people. In this map, you can see the overlap with those original single family zones from 1924 in that Black outline. And so the darker purple areas are what's called racially concentrated areas of affluence. And so there's been a fair amount of effort in the public sector to try to remedy these harms over time, but a lot of our fair housing laws actually prevent governments from looking proactively at race to benefit the people that they've harmed in the past. And in any case, these things take a long time to take effect. So we're hoping our work together can help you think about what you can do to support our Black and Native neighbors today, just in the present moment. I think I'll turn it back over to Allison now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Love. I learn so much every time I hear you talk about Portland's history of housing. I invite everyone to take a deep breath, kind of taking that in as we transition, as Love just mentioned, to talking tonight about what we can do about it. We're here tonight to learn about opportunities to take action, to redistribute housing-related wealth to Black and Native individuals and families. And while the history that Love just gave was centered in Portland, I think the actions that we're going to be talking about tonight feel relevant in a much broader context. To begin our panel tonight, we have a short video from Tommy, who we invited to join this panel, but wasn't able to join live due to a time difference. So let's see, if you bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to work on sharing that video of Tommy with you all.
He, him pronouns. I'm here today to share my story of what led me to get involved in wealth redistribution, specifically through the Housing Solidarity Project, who's been incredibly helpful and inspirational throughout the process. So I lived in Portland for most of the last 16 years until my family and I had an opportunity last year to move to Portugal. So we decided to do that. That's where I live now, but we owned a home in North Portland, an area that was historically Black, but had been very much gentrified in recent years. So, we decided we needed to sell our house, but, my wife and I are not big fans of capitalism and, in general, much less the real estate market and industry and the entire, we're very conscious of the way that BIPOC people have been systemically denied access to owning homes and have just had blocker after blocker repeatedly put in their path to trying to just to own a home, which is such a key way to build generational wealth. My parents owned houses; their parents did before them, and I certainly benefited from that. I mean, as a cis white male, I grew up with a good bit of privilege and opportunity that I know a lot of BIPOC people didn't have the same opportunities. So we felt like it was really important to find a way to sell our house that we could also not just not contribute to that problem, but find a way to help level the scales for some people and really give back to the BIPOC community. So we looked at a couple different ways of doing that. We looked at sort of a direct transfer, a direct sale to someone, a family that we could find that really needed a house. But there was a lot of logistics there that because we were sort of on a timeline in terms of our move, that was going to be challenging for us to feel like we could do that right. So we decided instead to go ahead and just sell the house through the normal channels. We had our realtor work with us to figure out a fair market value and just put it on the open market. But we committed to donating 50% of the profit that we made on the house back to the BIPOC community. Excuse me. And it was really important to us, not just to give to worthy organizations, which we did some of that, but to actually find individuals to help. Like someone, it can't be overstated the impact of just being able to give like $10,000 or $20,000 to someone, to a Black family, a BIPOC family who has had to overcome so many more hurdles to trying to get into the housing market, to own a home, to be able to just hand them the money that they need to get them over the finish line to afford the down payment or to afford to move into a house. Excuse me. It's so impactful, and you can make such a difference in the lives of people that you connect with. It's not just people in general. It's actual people that are in your community that in my case, I know that my ancestors contributed to this problem, that I benefited from this terrible state of the world. So anything that we can do to help counter that and to help level the playing fields, I think was worth doing. So we bought our house in 2013, and it appreciated quite a bit for no particular reason other than the housing industry is just so speculative and crazy. But we ended up making over $200,000 profit on the sale of our house, and so we were able to give away over $100,000 last year, which was awesome. And Housing Solidarity Project was so great. We've been able to help 3 different individuals and their families through connections through the Housing Solidarity Project. We also supported a number of local community organizations that we had personal connections with during our time there, that are working to benefit the to benefit the BIPOC community, largely in areas of housing equity, but other areas as well.
Gratitude to Tommy for sharing his insights, and I'm pausing him mid-video. We'll bring him back in to kind of simulate and pretend he's responding to Q&A. But in the meantime, I wanted to introduce our other panelists for today, beginning with Annie Moss.
Thank you, Allison. My name is Annie Moss. I use they and them pronouns. I just want to start by quickly saying that y'all's answers to the check-in question are very beautiful. I just keep reading through them and being so appreciative. So I'm going to start the story of my housing-related wealth with my maternal grandfather, but I also want to acknowledge that the story of privilege goes way, much generations prior to him. But for the purposes of tonight, I will start there. My maternal grandfather in the 1950s started a newspaper publishing company in Oregon and California. And it was structured as a family-owned corporation. So my mom was a shareholder and gifted shares to my sister and I when we were very young. And in the 90s, the company became quite profitable. My dad was a CPA, so sort of between the profitability of this family business and my dad's financial literacy, basically, by the time I graduated college, I had a significant amount of wealth to my name. And this meant that when I moved to Portland in my 20s, I was able to purchase a house in the Albina neighborhood. So I was purchasing a home way before any of my peers were able to afford a home. During my late 20s and early 30s, I also began to seriously consider how I wanted to relate to my wealth and privilege, because my relationship up till that point to my wealth had been built around guilt, shame, and overwhelm. In other words, I tried to make sure that nobody knew that I had wealth or privilege. I did everything possible to hide the fact that I had wealth and privilege. And at that time, I was fortunate enough to find my way to Resource Generation, which is a membership community of young people with wealth or class privilege who are committed to the equitable distribution of wealth, land, and power. So through my participation with Portland's Resource Generation chapter, I was able to kind of develop my own analysis of race and class. I gained a community of friends who still are some of my closest friends in Portland. Some of you are here tonight, who shared a similar analysis and similar values. And that really helped me feel supported to take ownership of my privilege and start to leverage it towards my values of equity and collective liberation, and take bold action. I think that was really something that having a community helped me do. So I was able to, at some point in my mid-30s, I was ready to move out of that house that I purchased in the Albina neighborhood. I was able to buy a second home. I rented my first house for a while, and then decided that being a landlord was not values aligned or really just sort of like interest aligned for me. And I wanted to sell the house. And I wanted to do so in a way that deprioritized profit maximization for me in favor of redistribution. And I was particularly interested in redistributing to the Black community because I knew that the Albina neighborhood was a historically Black neighborhood that had been gentrified by people like me. So my idea was to sell my house to a Black family for the remainder of the mortgage, and then to gift the equity portion. So I think what that meant, if I remember correctly, is that I sold the house. I wanted to sell the house for around $240,000. That's what was left on my mortgage. And I think the equity portion ended up being around $400,000 based on the value of my house at that time. So I knew I wanted to do this, and then it turned out to be a real puzzle figuring out how. I tried to contact lawyers, realtors, people in the housing policy world, and really couldn't find anybody who could help me figure out how to do this transaction. And ultimately, I ended up finding my way to Taking Ownership PDX. I knew that they were an organization focused on housing for the Black community in Portland, and so I figured I would just call them and be like, do you know anybody who could help me with this? Like a radical realtor who might be interested in helping me solve this puzzle. And so I got in touch with Randy Wyatt, who's the founder of Taking Ownership, and kind of pitched my idea to him. And during that, it was, the first time I'd ever talked to him. And during that conversation, he said to me, well, maybe I want to buy your house. So we ended up just talking on the phone for a couple of hours and sharing our stories. And by the end of the conversation, I was like, yep, I want to sell my house to him. And we ended up both being fortunate enough to know realtors who were willing to represent us and help us through this non-traditional transaction. We did explore the possibility of trying to structure the equity gift as a donation so that I could receive a tax benefit from it. Ultimately, that was going to be really complicated, and there wasn't really a good pathway to do it. And I wasn't really interested in prioritizing my own benefit. So instead, it functioned like a normal house sale, selling for the equity portion and then selling for the remainder of the mortgage. And then the equity portion was basically just classified as a large gift that I gave to him that year, to him and his family. And this all happened, I'm supposed to say when this happened. I don't actually remember exactly when this happened. This was maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe it was like 6 years ago. So the last thing I'll say about this is I felt really fortunate to find Randy in the way that I did. Like one of the things that was really important to me was that I wanted to avoid creating some kind of system of like application or gatekeeping around who I was selling my house to. I didn't want to put myself in a position of deciding who was worthy or even like what kind of criteria I would use to decide who was worthy. And so finding Randy ended up feeling so serendipitous, and just having him say like, well, maybe I want your house. And the added bonus, what ended up being really a beautiful added bonus of this was that he did have this association with housing justice for the Black community. And so we were able to talk about how could we turn, what I did was really a single, very non-systemic individual to individual transaction. But because of his platform and his connection to housing justice, we felt like we'd be able to turn it into something more systemic and bring other people into the work. So that I just feel grateful for that all the time, for that connection. And then the added bonus is that Randy's just rad. And I didn't really need to connect personally with the person I sold my house to, but I feel really fortunate that I did. And so glad that I have this relationship and connection with him.
Thanks so much, Annie. And next I want to introduce Lily.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Annie. I love hearing your story every time you say it. It gets me thinking and inspired again. My name is Lily. I use she pronouns. I grew up in the Albina neighborhood. And I'm going to keep the history on how I came to wealth shorter because I want to talk a little bit more about some of the strategies that I and my family have utilized for wealth redistribution. But I'll quickly say that some examples of how I came to my wealth, I used inherited wealth to pay for college, which allowed me to graduate debt-free. And shortly after school, I was able to purchase a house right away, which allowed me to get into the housing market quite early in my life, and have been accumulating housing-related equity ever since. I have also, I have since, I've been interested in finding, I liked Annie's phrase of bold action. I've been interested in finding mechanisms to contribute to bold action. And in my mind, I think I had always been thinking of them as, you know, big nonprofit efforts or, you know, government related efforts that I could vote for or that I could donate to or something like that. And then when I attended my first Portland Housing Solidarity group, I realized that I can take action now, that I don't need to be limited by other people's or the infrastructural limitations that have been previously seeming like a barrier for me to contribute directly to wealth redistribution. And for me, this is a form of reparation. So once this totally mental barrier was unlocked in my head, I have made direct cash gifts, much like Tommy has, to home buyers. And I've also been evaluating and trying to, as Annie was describing how she was like, how do I do this? What are the steps? What are my options? Who do I need to work with? I've been doing a similar thing in trying to find creative approaches to leverage the equity that I have accumulated to remove different types of barriers for homeowners. So for example, there's a home in my neighborhood that is not financeable. So it needs a lot of work, which means that it's a cash only sale. So I have cash, I can take advantage of that, fix the home up, and then all of a sudden this house is worth a lot more. That's a thing that my privilege generates more privilege, which generates more equity, which generates more privilege. And so one of the things that I am in the process of doing right now is taking funds that are a part of my retirement portfolio. So in my retirement portfolio, I have funds that are in sort of traditional investment firms that, you know, they're in mutual funds and things like that. And then a part of my retirement portfolio is real estate investments. So I buy a home, I rent it, or I use it in some other way and then sell it later and accumulate a profit from that. So those monies are available to me. And what I am doing with them is I am using the cash to purchase. So one of the homeowners that we're working with has identified a home that he would like to purchase for him and his family. He cannot finance it, and he cannot afford a home without financing. So I am going to purchase the home. We are going to fix it up together, and then I will sell it to him for exactly what I paid for it. So I make no money. The funds that were in my retirement bucket, they don't grow during this process, but that's fine. I don't need every penny to grow all the time. And it's still my equity. So then he gets to take advantage of the opportunity to buy a fixer, a cash only home, and still gets to finance it. Similarly, there's a family that operates, a Black family that operates a farm in our area. Their farm is about to go on the market, which would mean that unless they can buy it, they will lose their farm. And while they are able to secure the farm consists of 2 parcels. And while they are able to secure funding to purchase one of the parcels, they can't afford both. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking some of my funds that would normally be sitting in a retirement account, using them to purchase the second parcel so that they can purchase the first, the farm stays intact, and it allows them the time horizon and the opportunity to do more fundraising, apply for grants, do things that normally would be facilitated just by having cash around or access to cash. And so they can take several years to do that. I'm not yet at retirement age, so I don't need those funds for a long time. And I'm very happy for it to be a part of their process of securing a Black-owned farm in our area for them and their family. So in some ways, this is like a combination of a 0 interest loan. It's kind of like a direct sale in that I'm buying a thing that I just plan on selling back to these families at a future date. And it's also just sort of leveraging the privilege and the power of my access to cash that other folks don't have access to. So I'm sure I didn't hit on everything that I wanted to talk about, but I guess one of the big exciting parts for me that I think is illustrated by these stories is the ways in which I guess I've become emboldened to think about creative actions that I can take to intervene in the cycles of racist exclusion from wealth building opportunities for BIPOC folks. I think I'll stop there. Thanks everyone.
So much, Lily. Thanks for being on our panel. Finally, I wanted to introduce Ryan and hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. Thanks, Lily. Hey, everybody. My name's Ryan. I use he and they pronouns. I guess this is a bit kind of on the head, maybe, of what Lily was there. This might be more on the history and less on the action. And I don't personally own any equity at this point in my life, but my family certainly does and has for a long time in the Portland area. So I kind of wanted to start with a short show and tell, which is kind of what housing privilege and security through the years in Portland has looked like. So this is my 3 times great grandparents, Charlotte and Alva Beam, in their house in St. John's, circa 1909. Add in the great great grandparents and some more progeny, the great grandparents, my grandpa as a child, and on the other side of my family, this is my mom and her grandmother. So my families have owned homes in the area since 1909 in St. John's, on the Columbia River, a houseboat in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, for a long time in Southwest Portland. And soon after they got established here, they got involved in the plumbing and heating supply business. In 1928, they were involved in the creation of a business called Consolidated Supply, which is still around today. And the warehouse is down, actually, incidentally, in the Albina neighborhood. I don't know how long it's been there, but we ended up selling our half of the company in, I think, 1971. And from there, our family has basically invested that in the stock market. And then my dad was able to get a high level of education and a highly skilled, high income professional job, which he's been in for the last decades. Overall, I think that our family basically has, if we've done anything well, it's playing the systems exactly how they were designed to benefit families exactly like ours. And we've accumulated a lot of wealth over the generations doing that. As a result, I was able to go to college and come out debt-free. I've been able to work in relatively low income professions for my adult life and remain secure. And a portion of the family wealth has come to me in funds that are liquid. I found my way to wealth redistribution work in 2021. I participated in a program called Ancestors and Money, which is a creation of Morgan Curtis and Justine Epstein. It's very similar to resource generation, like Annie mentioned, and got me kind of looking at my wealth and figuring out how to act according to my values and situationality. So for the last 3 years, I've been creating annual giving plans and giving a portion of the wealth that I have access to away. I've been doing that roughly in accordance with where I see that wealth as having been extracted from, the communities and the lands. And so a bucket of that redistribution has been going towards Portland housing equity in recognition of the fact that Consolidated Supply in selling parts to developers, presumably, profited largely off of housing development in Portland. So I've been giving to groups within that framework for the last 3 years, having to do with housing equity, and then got involved with Resource Generation Portland in recent years, which got me connected with the Housing Solidarity Project. And so far with HSP, I've been able to give a $9,000 0% loan to one of the families, as well as a $1,000 gift to another. And I plan to keep on going from there.
Thank you all so much. I'm so grateful to have you sharing your experience and hopefully getting people's minds going. I'm thinking of the image that you had, Lily, of like unlocking something for those of us who do have access to housing related wealth and privilege. And we are here to answer folks' questions about what this has been like or the specific experiences. So I invite folks to start sharing any questions in the chat about housing related wealth and privilege redistribution. What it might look like, or the experiences that these panelists have had. I already see a question from M. Johnson. Did federal gift limits, aka gift and estate tax exemptions, affect your financial redistributions? I don't know if you'll all have an answer to that, but if any of you do, curious to hear.
I can answer from my experience. So as I remember I said that like we explored the idea of, creating some kind of like funneling it through a nonprofit so it could be a donation, ended up deciding not to do that. And what I learned along the way is that the gift tax limits are kind of actually like bonkers high. Like that was not, it was much higher than what I was gifting. So I think it would take a lot to hit that limit. So the short answer is no. But I will say that your accountant's feelings about gifting money might limit your ability to give money. And that was really where like the community and resource generation was so supportive, because I think I needed a supportive community to feel confident going to my accountant and being like, don't try to talk me into a more responsible tax choice. Like, I just want to do it this way. But the federal gift limits were not the barrier.
So I think there's not a I think that giftors owe a tax when you gift more than $17,000 to a person in cash. Then so for a married couple, which is my situation, and I did choose to spread 2 gifts over 2 different calendar years. So I could give $30,000 in 1 year, but if I spread it out over 2 years, I could give $34,000 because I wasn't paying that $4,000 in tax on the gift. That is one way that I have navigated the gift taxes. What my family has done with the tax implications of some of these decisions is to really say, if I have a certain amount of money to give away, I could contribute more of that if it is a tax exempt situation, but the point is to give it away. And so one of the light switches, or one of the hurdles that has been, lowered, it's not removed, but a thing that we have come to feel comfortable with is that we are not hunting for tax deductions, as Annie was saying, that the point is that we want to redistribute. And for us, it's figuring out the most effective and impactful way to do that on the receiving end, not so much on our end.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add in terms of the gift limits for giving going out. But I would just note that that's kind of like the device through which I've been able to receive inherited wealth from my grandparents' generation, is giving up to that limit each year. And I guess just overall in the last years of kind of like doing this work, I've gotten some windows into the world of wealthy tax consultants and lawyers, and the way that you buy into, if you can buy one of those lawyers, if you can pay them for their time, you can game the system, and you can, avoid paying a whole lot of taxes, much more even than the lawyer will charge. But the little glimpses I've gotten into that world have absolutely made my skin crawl.
Thanks all. Yes to that. Our next question, I think Lily, you'll be the best at answering this, is what's the process for a Black family to learn more about accessing the current programs?
Yeah, so we are asking folks to contact us through our website. Allison, I don't know if you could put the website in the chat. Many of you might have already landed on the website through the invitation that you received to be here. But if you are a person who identifies as Black or Indigenous, thank you, and would like to thank you. Learn more about how we are facilitating that process, please either send us an email or use the contact us page on the website. That's the best way.
Thanks. Seeing questions come in, I'm going to ask, I think one of my own, and then go back to the chat. How did you know that you could do this and still have enough?
I'm really excited about this question because Lily and I are going to give you totally opposite end of the spectrum answers. My answer is very unsatisfyingly intuition, or sort of like, I did not do a complex calculation of how much do I need and how much can I give away, but I just had a sense. Part A of the answer is I just had a sense that I could do this and I would still be okay. I was still going to own a home. I own 2 homes. If I did this with 1 home, I would still own another home, which is way more than most people I knew at that point had at my age. And I also, in the process of going through this process with Randy, I had this really clear moment where we were, it was the first time he came over to see the house, to just kind of like check it out and be like, oh, is this a place that I actually want to live? And we'd kind of done a walkthrough and we were standing on the back porch chatting. And I just had this realization that like, oh, this is building long-term security. Like I'm building this relationship with a person who is now part of my community. And in some ways that makes me feel that brings me a level of security that, you know, money is one type of security, but as much as we want to pretend that it is everything to our security, we don't know what's going to happen in this bonkers world. And so I think also knowing that by building community with people in this like deep and radical way, that brought me a really strong sense of security.
Yeah, so on the other side of the spectrum, as Annie prepped you for, I did a lot of calculating to try to determine what my comfort level was. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to a website that many of you will laugh at, as Ryan did when I shared this with the group. That was helpful for me in figuring out where my comfort level was in sort of projecting out how far the investments that I have right now will last, given various historical trends.
Thank you both. Another question that came in is also going to be for Lily. Sorry to go back to you. Has anyone worked with Proud Ground?
Yes. So we have worked with Proud Ground in a couple of different ways. On our website, I think you can see the workshop like this from last year, where one of the folks that we work with closely, Annie Rose, who is a local realtor, shared some really great insights about land trusts in general, and the pros and cons of them. Pro being that a home buyer can buy a home at a much lower price point. Con is that they don't accumulate generational wealth at the same rate that you would if you were buying a home that's not in a land trust. The idea of a land trust is that the home buyer buys the home and the land trust owns the ground underneath it. And generally a home depreciates as well as appreciates with inflation, but the ground appreciates more often. So most of the wealth generating capacity is in the ground, and that is what stays with Proud Ground. So security, home ownership, all of these things are super important, and it's for the home buyer to evaluate whether or not that is a thing that they are interested in. But yes, we as a group, we have been in good communication with Proud Ground, and one of the folks that we have worked with to buy a home bought a Proud Ground home.
Thank you all so much. Seeing that we have about 5 minutes until the hour and that some folks might have to go right at the hour, I do want to share a bit of like next steps and ways that folks can get involved. And then anyone who can stay after the hour, we can return to answering some more questions or just like leaving this space open for continued conversation because I know there are a few questions that we haven't yet answered. So I want to start by sharing my screen again and inviting Love back into this space in a moment. Let's see how it looks if I both spotlight you all and share my screen. It's going to be an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as Love shared on this slide earlier, the 3 things that Portland Housing Solidarity Project does is education about racialized disparities in home ownership and what to do about it. That's events like this. Second is community building to practice housing related wealth redistribution. And Ryan is going to talk about an upcoming opportunity for that. And third is connecting people with wealth to redistribution opportunities in support of Black and Native homeownership. And I want to turn it to Love to share opportunities that are active now.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So just want to give you a couple actions people with wealth can take right now to support our neighbors, in addition to anything else you might be thinking in the medium or long term. First, join our listserv. This is the best way to get connected with all types of redistribution opportunities, big, small, wherever you can plug in. It's also this place to see future events like this and connect with like-minded people who are trying to do this work.
That follow-up email will also have a link to a survey, which also maybe one of my co-organizers can put that link in the chat now, that asks for anyone who's interested to let us know how you'd like to stay involved or get involved in this work. So the survey offers a couple options like joining our listserv to receive opportunities to take action, like Love mentioned, getting support from us, navigating an active redistribution that you're considering, learn about becoming an organizer with the 5 of us, joining monthly co-working sessions to continue learning and taking action together, get involved in one of our partner organizations, or talk with one of us about one of these options or something else. So thanks, Ryan, for putting that link in the chat, and we'll send it out afterwards in an email as well. Ryan, do you want to share a bit more about the co-working events coming up?
Yeah, for sure. So these are events that we're going to experiment with the first one next month and then potentially do monthly after that. This will be a space for folks to plan and act on housing related wealth redistribution. I've found that last year, basically the only space that I actually was taking action in was co-working sessions like these. Doing this work in community in my mind is super critical. So we're going to be creating that space. There will be a in the survey. If you're interested in participating in this, there'll be a place where you can indicate your interests and we'll reach out to you after that.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Ryan. All right. I want to give Tommy a chance to share his advice for folks. So anyone who's able to stay on for a bit longer, I'm going to share the last 3 minutes of Tommy's video. And then I think all of us panelists can stick around a bit longer to continue being in conversation and answering questions. All right, I'm going to Bring Tommy back up.
But yeah, I guess, you know, if I have any advice, I would just say, just do it. Like, it's not something that's just for the ultra rich. Like, you know, we are not wealthy people. I mean, yes, we have some savings. I certainly recognize my own privilege, but you know, we're not millionaires. We're not living in mansions. Like, we're just regular people. And this, yes, we could have certainly used this money for other things selfishly, but I think it was just so important, and it means so much to us to be able to give back in this way and to help people with this. So it's something you can absolutely do too, especially if you're doing something like selling a house, and you're benefiting from this housing market that is so inflated. But yeah, the other thing, you know, I just say it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, you know, at first I was worried about all the different tax implications, and you know, it can even be challenging to figure out how to transfer like 20 grand to somebody. Like, it's not necessarily something that the banks make it really easy for you to do. But it's all very doable, and there's people out there to help you. Housing Solidarity Project is helping people with this every day, and then connect you with such amazing, worthy people to support. You know, you'll be all right. You'll be just fine, and you will change people's lives. And it's so worth it. So, you know, I'm sharing this not to, you know, say how great we are or anything. It's, you know, I want this story and other stories like ours to get out there and to be seen, and to inspire other people to follow this path, because it's really important. And it's the only way we're going to start to make a difference in providing more equity in home ownership and in generational wealth to the BIPOC community. So yeah, I just hope we can continue to talk about this more, help normalize this, just help people understand that, like, you know, as much as our society puts value on hoarding wealth, you know, there's always this message of, you can't have too much money. You have to save everything you can, because you never know what's going to happen, especially if you're a parent. You know, we have a son, and he's 7 years old. And you know, I think some people might accuse us of being bad parents because we're not hoarding every penny we can to be able to leave our son a fortune. And it's crazy. You know, I think this is something that's really important to do, and our son's going to be fine too. You know, we'll help him as much as we can as well, but it's you know, I think there's a balance that you can strike where you can provide for your own family, but you can also help others that need that help, and especially when you know, when they haven't had the same benefits that you may have from your background. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening. Take care.
All right. I'm grateful to Tommy for pre-recording that from Portugal, and want to return to any questions that folks here have. I saw Lisa had a question, but Annie answered it in the chat. So while perhaps other questions might be coming in, I'll ask the panelists, do you have one piece of advice that you would give to those looking to redistribute towards housing equity?
I guess I briefly mentioned this already, but just do it in community. This stuff brings up really, 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 I guess, insecurities and fears that are deeply, deeply packed into us. And I know I wouldn't keep going with this work if I wasn't surrounded with multiple of communities of people doing it as well. So we're here for you.
I would say just really not waiting for a sort of ready packed approach, but to really just sort of think creatively about your own situation and what ways you can leverage different forms of your own security and privilege and wealth. I think this is a gigantic issue that is not going away tomorrow, and it needs all of us thinking as creatively and boldly as possible. And then sharing those strategies with each other. I've learned so much from this group about how to do that, and I'm very grateful.
Thanks all. One question that I saw in the chat was, what is your process once we contact you? I think based on the timing of when that came in, that was related to Lily's answer about Black and Native families contacting us. And Lily, I wonder if you could speak a bit, perhaps both to kind of our process working with Black and Native families, and also if you want anything about kind of like the matchmaking work we do, or how we might respond if folks who want to redistribute wealth reach out to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Black and or Indigenous folks who are interested in purchasing homes contact us, the first thing that they will do is they'll meet with, and that could be an in-person meeting or a Zoom meeting or a phone call or email, whatever is most appropriate, with one of our team that's on the homebuyer team. So I am one of those folks, and we have others. And what we'll first do is just talk to you about what you are, what's in your way. So if you have a particular ask, we'll ask for more information about that. If there are other things that are getting in your way, we have a good network of organizations and individuals that we can direct you to try to remove some of the other barriers. And then once we understand better what you are looking for, we will, so we have a list of folks that have contacted us, and we are first come, first serve. So we then put your information on our list. And as we get to each person in the list, we will share that person's story. And what that means is it's whatever you're comfortable sharing. So if that's no personal details at all, that is cool. And if you would like to share more details, that is also cool. Your story and your ask would then be shared with our listserv. And so the listserv is where you go if you are a person with wealth and or privilege and are interested in doing some redistribution. And so we will share that opportunity with the folks on the listserv. Folks who are interested in contributing and sharing and redistributing their wealth will share that directly with the home buyer. We should have maybe said this earlier, but this organization receives no money. We do not touch anything. We are not a nonprofit. We are just a group of individuals. And so redistributors contribute their money directly to the home buyers. And so we facilitate those connections. And we work with each homeowner, home buyer, to find the right approach for them, depending on their comfort level, their timeline, their needs, probably some other things I'm not thinking of now. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, please let me know and I'll try again.
I think it did. Thank you, Lily. And I'll reiterate, yeah, we're just a group of individual organizers and activists trying to share more information about what's possible and make some connections to help facilitate this kind of redistribution. I think I've gotten to all of the questions in the chat. Someone can let me know if I have forgotten one. Maybe Lily, you can answer that question in the chat. But I'm seeing there's still 31 people here who want to hear more from you all. So another question that I wanted to ask you all is, what have you learned along the way? And what do you wish that you knew when you first started?
Okay, I'm going to answer Eve's question about that was in the chat while the three of you think about your answer to Allison's question. Okay, so Eve, yes, we do work with the African American Alliance for Homeownership. We also work with the Native American Youth and Family Center. We work with Portland Housing Center. We work with brokers who can facilitate Oregon bond loans. And what I mean by we work with is that we facilitate connections between the home buyers and those organizations, and try to make sure that what we are providing or doing with the home buyers aligns nicely with the services that those very competent nonprofits and other organizations are already doing. So we do our best to not duplicate great services that are already out there, but to really fill in the gaps and to make the connections as seamless as possible.
Okay, I'm going to tie together two questions. One question is the question of what we've learned along the way. And then I'm also seeing Remy's question about the joy that we felt while doing this work. And I think that's the perfect connection. I think one thing I've learned along the way is that it feels very joyful to think about money in a context other than hoarding, think about wealth in a context other than hoarding. It feels really joyful to build community with people who are pushing themselves in radical ways. It also feels scary. It feels empowering to tell your accountant that you're not going to be a profit maximizer, as long as you have community to back you up on that. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a huge growth process for me as like an adult to, I along with wealth, I inherited a financial advisor. I had inherited an accountant from my parents. I think anybody in this room with wealth probably has a similar experience where you inherit the infrastructure of wealth along with the wealth, and to kind of define your own relationship to your wealth can be really empowering and potentially really joyful.
Any other answers to either of those questions of like, what did you learn along the way, or how redistribution can be a joyful process?
Maybe less about joy, but I guess one thing that has been really important to me in the whole act of redistribution is, and this is really coming from that Ancestors and Money program that was really my start with this work, but it's just the importance of story and tying your actions in the current moment to the past and to the future. That's been a through line in the work since I've started, and I get a lot of meaning and gratification from resurrecting those stories, and I guess being the ancestor who's beginning to change them potentially. So that feels like it borders close enough on joy now that I say it.
I love that, Ryan. What kind of ancestor do you want to be? Seeing in the chat, we partner with Repair, which is Real Estate Professionals Against Institutional Racism. And Annie or Amanda, if you want to share a bit about the anti-displacement fund, I'll share that we've kind of been, our two groups have been in alignment as we've figured out the work that we want to do, and we have purposefully chosen to do different but aligned approaches. So Amanda or Annie, do you want to share a bit about the anti-displacement fund?
I'm happy to share unless Amanda, you want to jump in. I guess I'll start now and then Amanda chime in if there's anything else you want to share. But my name's Annie and Amanda is also on the call. We both are realtors in the Portland Metro, and we see day to day kind of what our lives look like with behind the scenes in the housing industry and how much ongoing harm there is to BIPOC folks within the industry, but also how much lack of awareness there is within our industry and from realtors and lenders. And so Amanda has been on doing this work since the beginning of Repair, and I've joined later. But we kind of have a three-pronged mission that you can look at on our website, but we are an official 501(c)(3), and that was an intentional move on our part. And so talking about with Allison saying aligned work, but different, because we are trying to target primarily realtors, but also other people. We wanted to talk about a little bit of our work here because it aligns really well as you're looking for getting action. But because we work with a lot of people who are self-employed, having the tax and deductions is kind of a removal of barrier to get people to donate. And so if you're looking for a way to donate money and make sure that the tax deductible part is easy, we have taken care of that part. And one of the things that we're currently doing is fundraising for our anti-displacement grant, which helps keep Black homeowners in their homes, because this is one of the things that we're seeing, and I think was kind of a common theme talked about in there, is that when the open market works without any kind of intervention, right? We're working on historic patterns. And so one of the things that is really important to know is Black homeownership in Portland has declined since the 1970s. So even if you were able to have a family member get into a home with redlining, with all of the exclusionary acts, right? That if you can't pay for that roof, like we've talked about, right? A developer, a wholesaler, a realtor who's looking for commission will knock on your door and be like, come sell it for cheap. Don't have to worry about this, or don't have to worry about the debt collectors. And so people aren't aware of how much that keeps happening. And so with that, we have started an anti-displacement grant that is, we're partnering with Randall at Taking Ownership, PDX. And he has an amazing network of Black homeowners, and he and his organization is focusing on the maintenance side. But what he's realizing is there's a lot of people who are one mortgage payment away from starting the foreclosure process, who have unpaid property taxes, who just like need actual money, not just maintenance stuff. And so with this creation of this fund, it's an emergency fund to keep people in their homes, cash direct, no questions asked of what it needs to be done, while we try to connect them with organizations that are foreclosure prevention specialists or other organizations that can help facilitate more complicated situations, get them set up with lawyers. Because one of the other things that we know as realtors is a lot of times people lose their house because it's a complicated situation. And if they can stay in it to start the long, complicated process, they can likely keep it. And so right now we've already issued 2 grants. We keep our barriers very, very low. So it's a 5-minute or less questionnaire that people fill out. We get the people recommended to us from Randall. So we are very much, we don't want to be involved. We don't want to have any questions, any gatekeeping. It's not up to us as white realtors to know whether or not people need this money or that they need to do a long application process. Then we've been getting the checks to them in less than a week. So they get money like that. We had one person who texted us at the end of March and was freaking out of how he was getting paid for his April mortgage. So we were like, nope, we're gonna get it to you before April 1st, so you don't have to worry. We have our other participant was able to negotiate forbearance with her mortgage company, but part of that was to be able to show that she had funds to pay her May mortgage, and then she could go into forbearance. Without the grant, she probably wouldn't have been able to do that. But we only have money currently for about 2 to 3 more grants, and we're actively fundraising because we know that there are several more people that need that. And so that's another way to kind of share creative ideas, ways to do things, and how to kind of collectively change the system. And it's a thing that we talk about with our realtors a lot of like, we're all benefiting, our careers are based in making a profit out of helping people access generational wealth through housing. And so, you know, thinking about a consistent donation of your commission. And so this might be another way to kind of start to think about smaller ongoing donations or things, or, you know, trying your, you know, kind of foot in the door, but thinking about kind of where are you benefiting, maybe income wise as well from the system, and how is that continuing to work. So, you know, that was a lot of info. Happy to talk to anyone about it more. If people are interested, and if Amanda has anything else really important that she wants to share, I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Annie and Repair. Thank you all of you for being here tonight. Again, we'll be following up via email with everyone who attended, and we will be sharing out a recording. And thanks for the gratitude in the chat. Annie, can I turn to you for any closing thoughts for us to end our evening?
Sure. If I were to envision our conversation tonight as a wheel, I think the hub of the wheel is really about community. And what we've learned tonight is that community can help inspire bold action and support radical action. Community brings joy. Community is a way to diversify your security portfolio beyond capitalism. And community is here, present, and there's an offering of community here tonight with the Housing Solidarity Project. So please be in community with us and invite your rich friends to join us as well.
Thanks so much, Annie. Thank you all for being here. We hope that you will be in touch and reach out to us via email or the survey link to continue the conversation. So grateful that you're here with us.